I'm Cassandra Hearn, a top divorce litigator in California. I have a passion for educating you through your own divorce process. I've taken the toughest of divorce cases to trial, including everything from divorces worth millions of dollars to serious child abuse cases to cases where spouses have turned to wage war against each other. Over the past 15 years of litigation experience, I have seen all of the highs and lows that come with making your way through a divorce. I created this podcast to help you gain insight and get into the right mindset so you can do a divorce by yourself, and to help you make all the right decisions along the way. Whether you're just thinking about divorce or are right in the middle of one, if you're looking for information, tools, inspiration, and a community to help you through it, you're in the right place. Welcome to the podcast, where I will be sharing with you all of my divorce secrets. Let's talk about how your own behavior can affect your divorce timeline. We're going to focus on communication, cooperation, compromise, and avoiding contentious behavior. Let's start first with communication. Now, I can imagine that as you begin the divorce process, or even if you're just thinking about the divorce process, the last thing you may want to do is have to communicate more with the person that you are trying to separate from or are contemplating separating from. And having that little knot in your stomach, or that feeling that you just don't want more communication, or that the communication has been so hard to this point, it can seem like it's an uphill battle. But we're talking about you, and we're talking about how your actions can impact your divorce timeline. So if we focus first on communication, we can think about how you will approach the situation. You can't control another person, but you can certainly control yourself. So let's look at the 3 tenets about communication that will be helpful to you in your divorce timeline. First, we're going to talk about clarifying your expectations. Everyone goes into their initial divorce stages a little unsure about what to expect and how things will move forward. It's important that you decide to communicate as clearly as you can, even at the outset, so that the other person understands not just where you're coming from, not just why you're coming from there, but also what you expect or want to see happen as the case gets going. So communication about your expectations at the outset will also help with reducing misunderstandings. If you're the party who is filing for a divorce, you may be the one who has a bit more information. Whether you caught your spouse by surprise because you filed for divorce and then just served them, or maybe you're just quietly wondering this by yourself, you may have additional information before your other spouse has even begun to contemplate the issue. You might have done your own research. You might be watching this podcast and your spouse is not. So adding the level of communication to your efforts in moving your case from 0 to forward is going to help with also alleviating miscommunications between the two of you. And speaking of miscommunications, what you don't want is to escalate problems. Many problems that arise in the early stages of a divorce can be avoided by simply having clear communication. For example, you don't want to escalate a misunderstanding about maybe when you would exchange your children, setting a drop-off time versus a drop-off place. Communicating all of that clearly is a great thing to do. Avoiding it, or being unclear, or using shorthand, or expecting the other person to just know what you want can set everything off to the wrong foot and create a level of mistrust. So failing to communicate can turn a small misunderstanding about when or where to exchange your children into a knockout, drag-out battle over child custody, which could take months or longer, even years, to resolve. Communication is so key, especially when getting started with this process. The next element I want to talk with you about is cooperation. Cooperation means doing your very best to try to work together. And it, again, just like communication, where you may not be excited about having to thoroughly and fairly communicate with your spouse, the next step is to really cooperate with your spouse. Cooperation will get you pretty far because when cooperation breaks down and the two of you are unwilling to work with each other, the next option is to ask the court to do the work for you. And that is a lengthy and expensive process for most people. Involving the court at every stage, even when you're just trying to get things going, is going to add a level of stress to you and your case as you move forward. So your decision to be cooperative with your spouse is going to have an impact on your divorce timeline. Now, we can't force your spouse to cooperate back with you, but you can control yourself and control how well you cooperate together. Let's talk about some specific examples. Cooperation is key when it comes to the idea of trying to move forward with negotiations for settlement. Each of you are going to have to come to the table and cooperate with each other to try to reach any kind of settlement or any kind of agreements in your case. And as I've mentioned before, I'll say it again, you are welcome to start cooperating and agreeing to things and settling things from the very outset of your case. You don't have to wait for a judge to tell you to start working on agreements and cooperating. Cooperation also helps you with removing or limiting legal intervention. That means that the more you cooperate, the more you reduce your risk to find yourself in a battle in a courtroom. In podcast number 4, we talk a lot about what does that actually look like and what does it mean when we say motion work. And that's when we're asking the court to help make decisions for us because we can't cooperate with the other side. Check out podcast 4 to learn about the divorce timeline for motion work. And think about it as you're listening to that podcast about how your decisions about whether or not you're going to cooperate with your spouse to the extent that you can, and you try hard to reach that, and how that'll impact the length and the timeline of your divorce. Finally, cooperation, of course, promotes mutual agreements. When your spouse sees you cooperating and working hard together to try to reach agreements, the likelihood that your spouse will bend and respect you and start to see that you are willing to work together, despite the fact that the relationship is over, is not only an olive branch, but a good sign to get things done. And it's time for a quick reality check. I've mentioned a couple times already on this podcast that you can't control anyone but yourself. And let's be clear, this isn't about controlling your spouse. This is about your own decisions for how you will behave in your divorce. Now, with that in mind, I want you to think about something. You can do your best to communicate and you can do your best to cooperate. But if you are hitting a wall or a dead end with your spouse, consider this. Is the dead end with your spouse or is the wall better or worse than having a complete and utter stranger make decisions for the both of you? And what I mean by that is when you go into court to file a motion, whether you're right or whether you're wrong, it's a stranger who doesn't know you and doesn't know your spouse that is going to make very big and very important decisions for you. So as you contemplate how far you might bend or how cooperative you want to be, think about not only is your case going to take a while to get in front of a judge, affecting your timeline for your divorce, but it's also going to be a judge who just knows nothing about either of you. And sometimes a neutral opinion is a good thing to have. But when you're asking a judge to make a decision for you, that's not an opinion. An opinion can come from a mediator who wants to guide the both of you into making a resolution, but a judge has the final say. And sometimes, even when you are right and you go in front of a judge, the judge makes the wrong decision. Either way, the decision is a decision that will affect you and your spouse, and it will be the rule or the law in your case. The nice thing about cooperating and working together is that you take the decision making away from that stranger and you put it back into your own hands. So keep that in mind as you're considering, am I going to move forward? And if I do move forward with a divorce, how well can I communicate and how well can I cooperate to get things done in my case? The next thing I want to talk about is compromise. And compromise is a little bit different than just cooperation. Cooperating means coming together to work together in a positive and hopefully effective manner. Compromise is talking about what will you give on when you do come to the table. So let's look at that. Compromising can be helpful in so many ways, especially when you elect to compromise on issues that can build trust. And what do I mean by that? I mean talking genuinely with your spouse and reaching agreements where you both give. Sometimes there's a little joke in the world of mediation that if you negotiate your case or the terms of your case and you reach a settlement, it's a good settlement if everybody is a little bit unhappy. That means you've all compromised. You didn't get 100,000% of everything you've ever wanted, but neither did your spouse. You come to the middle, or you come to terms that you can both live with. So keep in mind that compromising can be effective. It can give you both control that you wouldn't give to a stranger, and it can get you somewhere close to the middle, whatever that middle ground looks like for you. Another thing to think about when reaching compromises is priority. You may want to give and agree on some of the many smaller terms that could be more important to your spouse than to you. Oftentimes, when you're coming together, there's this little bit of hesitation. Nobody wants to be there. Nobody's really happy that the relationship is over. And you've got to communicate with each other and be in the same place with each other and work together when you just want it over with because you're just trying to get out of the situation. But you've got to give yourself a little extra push just to get it done and to a fair place to be. So, oftentimes giving little bits of things that matter to your spouse that you maybe don't even really care about or that are just low-hanging fruit for you, but your eyes on the prize are a much bigger picture. Building that trust and coming to some agreements at the forefront is a great way to get started and to get your spouse to say, hey, yeah, look, we can actually work together. We can actually resolve this. Funny enough, I've had cases where spouses have come so close together that they actually are scratching their heads saying, hey, maybe we can still actually make this work. And I have had cases that have completely settled, documents signed and sent down to court to be finalized and done. And then they call and say, hold the funds, pull it back. We want to save the marriage. Don't let the judge sign our settlement. So that's sort of an extreme example, but working together and reaching those compromises is what it's all about when it comes time to disassemble the community or the family that you built together. Remember, it's kind of like that movie Wedding Crashers, if you've ever seen it. They're actually divorce mediators working to try to get people to compromise as their day job. And, they crash weddings at night. But in that movie, one of the things they do is they point out all of the good reasons why the couple got together in the first place. And when you're thinking about compromise and you're thinking about working together, sometimes it's a good idea to reflect on the good things that made you attracted to this person or that made you want to be together with this person. so that you can amicably be apart. So, the last C that I want to talk about is contentious behavior and how you can think about getting yourself ready so that you avoid being contentious. Contention in court is tough. It adds friction, it adds time, and it certainly adds expense. As I was mentioning earlier, if you can't work together, your case is headed to having a stranger make the decisions for you. So, when you're thinking about how should I behave if I'm trying to communicate and I'm trying to cooperate and I'm trying to compromise, but I'm not getting anywhere, you can still move your case forward without being contentious. Some opportunities are available to you if you can't get the ball rolling, or maybe it's your spouse that's just decided that they're filled with anger or spite or frustration, and all they want is further litigation or costs or court time, attorney's fees, you name it. What can you do to reduce contention in your case? One thing I would recommend is to go ahead and get a neutral involved, like an out-of-court mediator, to try to assist you with reducing the contention. So if there are motions pending, if there's fights going on between the scenes about discovery or other issues in your case, you can utilize the help of a neutral, trained professional to try to see you through those things. If you don't, what can you expect? Lengthy waiting times in court, expensive attorney's fees, if you can even afford one, long wait times to be heard by a judge, continuances where the judge can't hear you on the day you thought you were going to be heard, evidentiary hearings, which is where each side testifies or provides evidence to the court to be heard, arguments, appeals, interlocutory appeals, step by step, adding it all up to be one big contentious fight. And if you don't have the ability to utilize a neutral, you can still work together to try to resolve issues as they arise. So how about a few more quick tips other than using a mediator of what you can do to try to move forward even when things become contentious? First, keep the big picture in mind. Not every little thing is worthy of a fight. And so this comes back to, what can you bend on? What can you compromise on? Even if it's just the other side that's being contentious, what can you do to settle the issue? Is there something that would work? So think about the big picture. What are the couple of things that really matter most to you? And can you settle everything else? Can you narrow the scope of what the fight is really about? Another option is for you to stay informed. Stay on top of your pleadings. Stay on top of the law. Visit our website as often as you can to get as much free information about what's going on with the law and what issues are relevant to your case. Finally, I know this is the hardest one, but it's going to go the longest way. Maintain respect. No matter how contentious the other side is, maintain respect. Don't forget that this is the person you decided at some point that you loved and you wanted to be with. And don't forget that this is the person you built a life together with. And don't forget that this is the person who you are gently trying to untangle from, but you'll have to deal with them for quite a bit more. Whether that's because you have children together and you will be co-parenting until the children are 18 or longer, or because if you don't have children, it's a division of the estate, and dividing your estate together takes a while. Or even if you don't have an estate, you need to be able to get through the divorce process together as smoothly and as quickly as possible. Maintaining respect with your other person will get you to your end goal substantially faster than engaging back in the contentious behavior that they may be displaying. So, with all of these things in mind, go forth with communicating as clearly as you can, cooperating and coming to the table together, compromising and trying to find a middle ground wherever you can see one, and ultimately do your best to avoid contentious behavior. And if you're being subjected to it, do your best to maintain those tips to keep your case moving forward. See you next time.